Welcome to Intuition, a weekly podcast from Don Elzer at the Wildcraft Forest. Join us every week as we discuss rewilding the human experience and the state of nature. There is a wild mysticism that exists within the human experience. It is the mystical union that we have with nature. It is the belief that our direct knowledge of a spiritual truth, great spirit, or ultimate reality can be attained through a subjective experience supported by intuition or insight with nature. This involves coming in contact with nature while at the same time recognizing that it is sentient and is equal in intelligence and intention to ourselves as human beings. In this process, we have a responsibility that goes beyond ourselves, and in order for us to be fulfilled, we require a tangible connection to the earth. We need to discover our true purpose, and this is why you are listening to this message. You are on a quest. The great changes that are emerging are cellular, as the earth, our bodies, consciousness, and our sense of place transition to become more localized. We are abandoning failed systems of hierarchical management, and instead we are empowering ourselves to once again become the mystics and the stewards of planet Earth. We know what needs to be done, but we must learn planetary and cosmic guiding and navigation skills, which considers a long view that is multi-generational. We are linked to everything through vibrational electromagnetic energy, which is then measured by frequency. Frequency is most often measured in cycles per second, or CPS. The average person measures at about 250 CPS. However, people who are psychic can perform psychic physical healing and be measured at rates from 400 to 800 CPS. Then there are people who are connected to the higher self, and it is found that they function in the 800 to 900 CPS frequency range. Mystics, on average, measure 200,000 CPS of vibrational electromagnetic energy in their electric body, which surrounds their physical body, and this electric body is also known as the etheric body. Key questions we need to ask: who are these mystics? What causes this incredible jump in frequency? Can the other species or sentient beings who reside with us on this planet have their own mystics as well? Might a mother tree be the wild mystic within the forest nation? Our DNA holds the stories belonging to our ancestors, and each represents a memory which can surface within our dreams and wild intuition. Trees can serve as conduits for these ancient signatures, and they can awaken all sorts of inner knowing within us. Nearly all ancient cultures held that trees were sacred. The Druids believed that the shadows within the deep crevices of the bark found on an old mother tree held all of the wisdom of the cosmos. So they would touch and meditate with those deep crevices. We are the result of thousands of years of tree worship, and with the guidance that we gathered from all of it, we learned that we are Gaia's imagination. For the past 2 decades at the Wildcraft Forest School, we have endeavored to strengthen mystics and their intuition within a contemporary form of shamanism. We have been seeking to place into practice an experience that links the logical mind with that of an individual's perception of spirit. We believe that over the course of time, that our analysis and application found within the sociology of shamanism will contribute to one of the most important chapters in the history of religion and spirituality. Central within the practice of various forms of therapeutic counseling remains the innermost ideas of how the individual thinks of themselves and their belief as to what exists within the world of unknowns that surrounds them. All of this might be described as a great mystery, and it is within this spiritual landscape that the shaman began to interpret the idea of the soul eons ago. Within human evolution, the first notion of the soul within a story may have been one of the greatest stories ever told. In fact, it may have resulted in our first self-realization of our own consciousness. Therapies that involve the mind, as well as medicines that depend on an individual's interpretation of the mind, both require a belief in an idea dedicated towards recovery and renewal. If this belief weakens, then these wellness practices falter. Historically, and even to this day, the shaman nurtured the beliefs that linked the individual and the community with the natural world, which was believed to anchor all aspects of wellness and healing. It is this relationship that constructed certain belief patterns that reside within us today. However, the farther that we remove ourselves from nature, the weaker this belief system becomes. This weakness continues to deplete our modern culture because we are missing the messenger or the emissary that can demonstrate the power of the natural world and remind us of the mystical relationship that we have with it. Elements associated with belief have forever influenced all forms of society. Belief is an acceptance that an idea or statement is true, or that something exists that causes one to have a firmly held opinion or conviction that supports that idea. As humans, we are seeded with a need to know more about our existence. We might logically come to understand a belief because we can prove it in some way, but then there are unknowns that we can't prove unless we embrace some sort of a spiritual idea. The meaning of spirituality has developed and expanded over time, and various connotations can be found alongside of each other. Spirituality is a broad concept with room for many perspectives. In general, it includes a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves, and it typically involves a search for meaning in life. As such, it is a universal human experience, something that touches us all. Our beliefs are connected to everything that we can logically prove, as well as the elements of faith in belief, which define an explanation connected to all things that remain abstract. Both evolve over time. They first present themselves in context to a tribal society, but as populations grow, they evolve into being explained within a civilization. At this point, a religion might form. Religion is a social cultural system of designated behaviors and practices, morals, worldviews, texts, sacred places, prophecies, and rituals, all relating to supernatural or spiritual elements. Often a religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman-like controlling power, especially a personal god or gods, which can serve to strengthen a morality within a society. They can be both creator and executioner, as they become instruments for keeping order in a complex society. The structure of belief within a society is constantly under pressure, and if that society becomes dysfunctional, or if the common individual outgrows the story of that society's belief, then that individual begins their quest for a different story, one that is more in keeping with their newfound elements of belief. Peter Farb, author of Man's Rise to Civilization, spoke of contemporary shamanism in the 1970s and tried to describe the differences between shamanism and organized religion. He said, "Priests are quite different than shamans. Priests exercise no spiritual powers of their own, but are merely those people selected by society to become experts in the performance of sacred ritual. Shamans are born, not made, but priests most assuredly are made by long and arduous training. Whenever shamanism appears in a state, it represents a threat to orthodoxy, and everything is done to suppress it. The Catholic Church, right up until the time of Reformation, expended considerable energy to denouncing and burning false prophets and heretics, who were really shamans impelled by their inner religious feeling rather than by orthodox training. Farb went on to predict that shamanism would be on the rise. He stated, "The revival of shamanism in the United States is probably symptomatic of the weakening of Orthodox religion's ability to regulate social behavior and to maintain social values, and of the lack of any stirring new philosophy or ethic to replace the vacuum left by traditional religions." Within our shamanic coaching program, we are not endeavoring to start a new religion, nor are we replicating any specific indigenous spiritual teachings. What we are seeking to accomplish is a pooling together of earth-based spiritual teaching, ancient wisdom, behavioral science, logic, and intuition, in order to create a new or different story that will inspire the individual's own meaning and purpose, and that this story be constructed with certain pillars that include spirit, science, stewardship, sentience, and sanctuary. Currently, the contemporary story of shamanism seems to describe all indigenous forms of spirituality or medicine. In fact, shaman are very isolated to very few areas in Eurasia. For the rest of the world, indigenous cultures did not describe their healers, prophets, and spiritual leaders as shaman. They described them in names, terms, and words appropriate to their language and understandings. The term shamanism was projected upon tribal beliefs as an act of colonization in order to make a distinction from Christianity or other large religions. Nevertheless, shamanism is now incorporated into the modern lexicon as describing all forms of earth-based spiritual practices. In our modern field of understanding, shamanism is described as a practice that involves a practitioner reaching altered states of consciousness in order to perceive and interact with what they believe to be a spirit world and channel these transcendental energies into this world. From this perspective of this particular teaching series, this description might be considered very limited, since we know that shamanism is so much more. Central to shamanism is the guardian spirit complex, which is an ancient phenomenon of considerable cultural, social, and psychological significance for the great majority of indigenous societies throughout the ages. The guardians take on many forms. They can be people, ancestors, spirits, plants, and animals, even energies. The basic premise is that all biotic or abiotic beings are alive and have varying degrees of sentiency, whether they are a stone or a person. All of these guardians exist surrounded by an energy field that contains extraordinary properties. Each of us, in fact, all biotic beings, are surrounded by this energy field, which we call a biofield. In 1994, a panel of scientists at the National Institute of Health chose the word biofield to describe the field of energy and information that surrounds and interpenetrates the human body. The biofield is composed of both measurable electromagnetic energy and hypothetical subtle energy, or chi. As a shamanic coach, you would be encouraging this expansion of certain natural sensitivities that exist within the individual's biofield. The guardian spirit complex surfaces as a primary influencer. This complex might contain ancestors, angels, spirits, animals, and plants. Totemism is a system of belief in which humans are said to have kinship or a mystical relationship with a spirit being, such as an animal or plant. The entity, or totem, is thought to interact with a given kin group, or individual. The totem then serves as an entity which can guide or advise the kin. Humans have a long-standing belief system in guardian spirits that goes back to ancient times. In today's world, these guardians have been largely ignored by our culture. However, they still reside as feelings and ideas within us, but they are often suppressed and with a lack of articulation from the individual. A shamanic coach encourages the individual to deeply connect with the guardian spirit complex in an effort to explore new ways to interpret the issues of one's life. Contemporary shamanism seeks to define the human experience within the context of an ecosystem, or perhaps a forest. Forests in remote places carry wild systems rich in biodiversity, and these are the places that still hold a natural balance required for our planet to survive. These wild places also carry the cosmological platforms which link our logical selves to the greater essence of our soul self. So these places can teach us a great deal about ourselves and our connection to wild relationships. Here, the elements of spirit, sentience, science, and stewardship are pillars, and they support an archway, which becomes the architecture for all that is sanctuary. The foundation for supporting all of this is love, the love that we have for the natural world, others, and ourselves. What might make humans unique in the cosmos is this relationship that we have to things that are driven by our love for them. To love someone or something more than we love ourselves is agape love, and it becomes a powerful emotional driver when it comes to acts of stewardship. It is what makes us extraordinary. We really have a lot to learn about how everything works and how everything is connected. Love becomes an activator for stewardship when humans become present in the natural world. Love is like a seed which triggers a natural reciprocity. It activates life force. As ancient humans, we had a great understanding about all of this, and our role was one of navigating stewardship so that we could regenerate biodiversity within the Earth's natural systems. We sought to retain high levels of life force for both local ecosystems and the planet. This natural presence of wild biodiversity provided us with food and medicine and became the original economy for humans. Nature was our kin. Eons later, this wild kinship, this biodiversity, still provides critical support for our survival. So why is this important? How does it reflect a need today? Many people have abandoned their intuitive self, their soul self. They have embraced only their logical self, which is then supported by a firm scientific and social explanation. But what if things cannot be explained? What if we can't find a scientific reason to forgive ourselves or to discover our meaning and purpose? What if one can't find a way to explain death and the death process? What if one can't explain a deep-seated loss? All of these human questions and emotions require a soul connection, and sometimes that connection has to be rebuilt from scratch. And only the individual can do this. This dynamic is very much the platform from which a shaman might guide an individual as they become the seeker. The difference between the ancient ones and ourselves is that of confidence. We are not confident with the unknowns that dwell within the cosmos. I notice this in the forest. Most people are not confident enough to know in knowing that the ideas that they are being seeded with are coming from the trees, the guardians, and other wild beings. They do not trust the wild cosmos. Instead, they believe that they themselves have formed those ideas alone. By believing this, they miss the elements of cosmic collaboration and of wonder, which represents the bones of the human experience. To place yourself and to place your trust in the wild cosmos is to be free and to be truly human. You then become the mystic. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Intuition. Learn what we do at the Wildcraft Forest. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and by visiting our website at wildcraftforest.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast on YouTube, please subscribe. Thanks again.